Hi, I'm ZKTour from ZK Research, and I'm here for another ZKTour. I'm here live in person at VMware Explore, formerly known as VMworld. I'm at the VMware booth, and one of the interesting things about VMware is it's a company that's cut its roots in virtualization, but over the last 5 years, it's really made some great strides in networking and security. And at one of the stands, they've got some great demos set up in both those areas. So we're gonna go in and have a look. So follow me in. Let's go take a look and see what VMware is doing in those areas. So here I am at the SD-WAN stand and inside the VMware booth, and I'm joined by Scott Calvert, Director of Technical Marketing for Sassy. Why don't you just do a quick intro on yourself?
Yeah, my name is Scott Calvert. I'm Director of Technical Marketing for VMware Sassy. Been with the company 11 years, and can't wait to talk to you more about what we're doing.
Now, I think it's pretty well understood that the entire business world's changed, right? In the last couple of years since the pandemic began. We went from everyone in the office to everyone from home.
Yes.
Now they're in this weird world of hybrid work, right?
Right.
What are you hearing from their customers is how they're having to change the network in order to accommodate hybrid work? Is it helped SD-WAN? Is it slowing it down? What's going on with SD-WAN?
Yeah, I think it's totally helped, because traditionally customers would route everything back through the data center, and there's so many apps existing in the cloud, and they're also accessing them from different places all over the world. So to go back to a physical data center, you're going to have this hairpinning thing going on where a lot of times it's slowing things down. The other thing is people need better security in this time, and how do I get an optimized connection back to my apps in the most secure way possible? And that's a problem where everybody's dealing with.
Yeah, and historically we've thought of, I think, security and networking separately.
Yes.
Right, over the last 2 years, there's been this term Sassy that's being used, which is really the coming together
Yes.
of SD-WAN and security, right?
Absolutely.
And so are more and more of your customers in that complete Sassy offering, or are they still thinking about the two things separately?
I think right now that they're thinking about it separately, but what they need to understand is that it's a journey. So you're not going to get to Sassy overnight, and you're not going to get all these different technologies that Sassy comprises of overnight. But you need to start off with something like SD-WAN, which is really the gateway into operationalizing all this security stuff and delivering it in an optimized way where the experience is still good, but it's also secure. Yes.
Now, when I talk to customers, the term Sassy tends to have a lot of different definitions depending
Absolutely.
on what vendor you're hearing about it from. And so there's a lot of confusion about it. And so you're going to help us out, do a little whiteboarding today on some of the myths behind Sassy to help you understand better what is Sassy and what isn't Sassy.
What is Sassy? Well, number one, it's an acronym. And I think that's where a lot of people fall down and they get confused.
Well, we're in tech, so we have to have acronyms.
That's right, lots of acronyms. So Sassy stands for Secure Access Service Edge. So that's the acronym, and that's all about providing the secure access point for all your endpoints and people connecting into remote.
Now, this last term, edge, though, is interesting because I think what we used to think of the edge was your branch office.
Yes.
Right? And that has now
That's right.
completely blown up, right? So,
That's right.
So what are we thinking about with edge today?
Yeah, so the perimeter of the network is wherever the person's working. Like you said, it's no longer the entrance into the office.
Yeah.
That's the perimeter. So it's really where everybody's working. And you think about work from home, like we were just talking about work from anywhere. People are traveling all over the place, working from the beach, working from their family's house, and this is important. That's now the edge. So exactly.
So that's an important point for you watching, that if your Sassy provider can't provide connectivity to every type of edge, that's not really Sassy, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And it's very important to understand that it's endpoints plus the branch offices, etc. So there's a lot of myths about Sassy, right? And I think a lot of people caught on as a marketing term, and it's gotten lost the true meaning, right? And what I like to tell people is Sassy is not one of the big myths about it is that everybody thinks it's a single product, right? And it can be. You can consume it from a single vendor. But really, the most important thing to understand is Sassy is an architectural framework as Gartner defined it, right? So this is very important. And this to me is key to the whole discussion, because there's no new technologies in Sassy if you think about it. And what I can lay out here is that the best way to define Sassy is Sassy equals WAN edge, let's write that, plus this other acronym that Gartner's starting to talk about called SSE, which stands for Security Service Edge. So it's important to understand, and SD-WAN is the biggest component of this, WAN edge. And then the SSE are the cloud security components. So here's some more acronyms for everybody. But you have SWG, Secure Web Gateway, right, which helps you with your URL filtering, blocking traffic to sites you don't want people to go to. CASB, which helps you govern access to your cloud applications like Office 365, OneDrive, that kind of stuff.
And these are two technologies that pre-cloud we didn't really deploy a lot of.
No.
But now that everything's moved to the cloud, have really become core staple security products.
Absolutely, it's front and center to how they're governing applications because they've moved so much there, exactly like you're saying. So that's so important. The two other important technologies in Sassy are firewall as a service. Some people say FWAS, and then the last one here is ZTNA. So when you put all these 5 technologies together, that's where you get Sassy. But this the SD-WAN part, a lot of people forget it. And a lot of vendors in the space deliberately leave that out because maybe they don't have a play in that space or one side or the other. But it's important to understand that this architectural framework is operationalized by SD-WAN. This is the way you're really on board, and that's what helps customers in the journey to get to that.
Now, one of the other myths that I've heard about too is that Sassy, some vendors say it's got to be all cloud-based. Right. Then you have other vendors that largely live on-prem that say, no, it's all prem-based. What is that mix of cloud versus prem? How should customers think about how to leverage the different places in the network?
I think it's important to understand where that vendor's coming from, where they make their money, and that's how they'll determine what the importance of a thick edge is what I like to call it. But you really have to think about it. It's like the problem with thick edge is you get a lot of complexity, and there can be configuration drift in these snowflake firewalls that are around. And while that's there, you do need to provide like advanced firewall services at the branch to protect against east-west traffic, internet breakout. You want to keep that as light and thin as possible, because the more you move stuff to the security service edge in these cloud applications, the better governance, the better maintenance you have. I was in IT, and one thing I always say is complexity is the enemy of good security. You can get all the greatest tools in the world, but if you don't have them set up and you can't monitor them correctly and it's not simple enough, you're going to create holes for yourself and potentially get hacked. Yeah.
So what's another myth you'd like to respond to?
So another myth is, we said Sassy is not just a single product. It can be. Yeah. And the other myth is that that it's a new technology or something like that, and really it isn't. And that's where I wanted to just highlight that architectural framework. That these are all existing markets, existing tech, but they've never existed together in a way that they were really heterogeneous.
Well, there's many vendors. If you Google Sassy, right, you're going to get hundreds of vendors that claim to be Sassy vendors. Is it important that you have both components? Because I know a lot of companies are really strong in networking, have no real presence in security, so maybe they partner there, or you have a security vendor that's got some kind of light WAN play. You need to be strong in both.
I believe so, and it's important because it's also how you deploy these. So, like I said, SD-WAN is important to operationalizing this. How do you manage that? How do you maintain it? How do you govern it? SD-WAN plays a critical role in that. But some vendors will just say, hey, you just need this. But again, if they're leaving SD-WAN out, they're going to be missing out on optimizing that connectivity. A big problem with doing security in the past is that when you introduce that, it can create some latency. It can ruin the quality of the experience for users. So if you want to maintain that, keep it optimal, you're going to need SD-WAN to do it. But I'd say, it's a journey. Now, one thing, a lot of other vendors in the space, they may say, like, if you're a single Sassy vendor, you're one of the few, because not everybody has both sides of this coin. Yeah. That's right. And then if you think about the ones that do, VMware is one of those, but we really love to emphasize choice. So you have two ways to really consume this. So Sassy, I'll get into this, is you have two methods, right, to consume Sassy. Excuse me, let me write this. Two methods. There is converged and something called integrated. Okay, so I've been at VMware a long time, long time. And one of the things I love about VMware's story is that we like to provide choice, and this is something, so a single Sassy vendor can have a converged solution. So this is where you have all those Sassy components I just talked about, SD-WAN, SWG, all that. Now an integrated solution could be, you get your SD-WAN solution from, let's say, a VMware, and then you want to use a company like Zscaler, which might meet some of your niche needs from a cloud security standpoint. And that's where you could add in another vendor here. The importance of this is sometimes you have larger enterprises, they may already be using a specific SSE vendor or a specific SD-WAN vendor. The ability to have choice is important.
Yeah, well, you're just giving choice, and I think that's
exactly
because especially when it comes to security, asking customers to do a hot cut, that's very difficult.
That's right, absolutely. The other thing I'd say is when you're looking at this converged offering, and like you said, there's a handful of vendors who provide this. Do all the services reside in the same POP? So POP, for those who don't know, is point of presence. And this, we try to put these all over the world. VMware has hundreds of POPs. And the closer that is to your users, and we talked about the folks that are on the road, they're connecting in from different places all the time, or they're working from anywhere. You need lots of POPs to get them connected as soon as possible, or quickly as possible. And then we can direct them onto their cloud apps or back to the data center in the fastest way possible, leveraging, for VMware, we have this great technology, VMPO, which is dynamic multipath optimization. And we use that once you connect into that Sassy POP to get to your location faster. But the great thing about our solution versus other vendors is everything is consolidated inside that POP. Some vendors might offer all the services, but the services could exist in separate POPs. So what you end up doing is hopping around a few times before you actually get to your destination.
All right, well thanks, that was a great overview of Sassy, and I think we're going to hop over to a different stand now and talk about network intelligence, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
All right, well we're back at the SD-WAN Sassy stand, and I'm joined here now by Mike Scott, the former Houston Astros pitcher, I believe, but also technical product marketing manager for VMware. Why don't you just do a quick intro?
Hi, I'm Mike Scott. I'm a senior technical product manager with VMware in the Sassy product.
Yeah, and so we're going to talk about your edge network intelligence, but before we do that, I just want to give a little background, I think, of why this is important. We live in a world today where customer and employee experience mean everything. In fact, my research shows that customer experience initiatives is the #1 digital transformation project companies are going through. Little known interesting factoid, last year 2/3 of millennials admitted they changed loyalties to a brand because of a single bad experience. You talk to employees now, they're changing jobs at a pace never seen before, and they're going to go work at a company where they have the best chance to be successful, and that has a lot to do with the internal tools they use, things like Zoom. And so if you have a good experience, you have a good chance of retaining those employees. If you have a bad experience, well, you have a good chance of churning them again. And so, Mike, when you talk to customers, how are they thinking about the apps they use and the problems they have, and what's really changed in the world?
Well, I think what's really changed is not only the number of apps, but the number of devices that are on the typical network. Especially if you look at a campus-wide network, there's lots of Wi-Fi, there's APs, there's controllers, end-user devices. It's a complex system, and then when something goes wrong, it's typically not a case of where you don't have enough information that there's a problem, but operators, IT departments have too much information. So they're flooded with number of alarms, logs, and things like that, and it really takes them a long time to go through those, kind of consolidate them and get to the root cause.
Yeah, and I think that you brought up an interesting point in complexity. I think one of the least talked about impacts of the pandemic was the change to the IT organization. Right? We talk about the changes in the way we learn, the way we shop, how different it is to work from home. Well, the IT organization has got to support all this stuff now, right? And in conjunction with that, because of things like Sassy and SD-WAN that we talked about, the environment is more complicated. Right? And so now I believe if you're going to be a successful IT pro, you need new tools and new processes, and I believe your Edge Network Intelligence, or E&I, is designed to help them with that.
Correct.
Yeah.
So what E&I does is it's an AI-based analytics engine, and so it takes a number of different feeds from the network, it consolidates those, it converts them into metadata, and then it pushes them out to an AI engine in the cloud. And one of the really clever things about the way it works is it establishes dynamic baselines. There's no fixed baselines for different performance KPIs. And what it does is it determines if, after determining this baseline, it'll figure out if something is out of compliance, and then it will not only alert on that dynamically, but then it'll also correlate other corresponding logs or indications that might be part of the same root cause.
Yeah, so the dynamic baselines I find fascinating, because there's, an axiom in IT, you can't measure what you can't see. Well, you also can't see what you can't measure, right? And a lot of times, if you don't know what your baseline is, it's hard to understand whether you're actually, out of compliance with that, right? So you actually, in real time, can change that baseline based on the current conditions.
That's correct. It's a continuously learning environment. So as conditions change, it's continuously updating what that baseline is.
Okay, Mike, well, you introduced us to ENI. You're going to give us a little demo here. So what are we looking at?
So this is the initial dashboard. When you log into Edge Network Intelligence, this is where you'll land. So what we've got here is this is actually a live customer. This is their anonymized data that they've been kind enough to allow us to use for demo purposes. This is a healthcare solution.
So this is actual real data?
Correct. It's just been anonymized to remove any sort of identifying information, so we can actually use it. One of the challenges with ENI is that you do have to have some real data from a real network to kind of get some meaningful. Of course. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the analysis tab up here, and then we're going to look at like a 2-week periodicity. And what we're going to see is there's going to be some incidents based on priority. So you can see here the incidents that have been identified by the system. I'm going to choose one here, this P3 down here, DHCP protocol latency issues. The reason I'm picking that one is it's affecting 280 users.
And so just for the video on the dashboard, it does show how many incidents you have and the percent of frequency. So that's a good way for IT to be able to drill down into what's important, because I think often, and I'm a former IT pro myself, is you get fixated on some problems, but then if you see it's only affecting 4 users, maybe you want to move off of that into something that's a little more critical. And so you're actually helping them prioritize their troubleshooting tasks.
So if we drill down into this problem, you can see that this is the dynamic baselining for the performance of DHCP that's been established by the AI engine, and there's a standard deviation, so you can see that this incident is actually outside the standard deviation of the dynamically established baseline.
Okay, and that's very easy to see where that is. Right?
Correct. So going down, we'll look into some more detail. So we can come down to here and the DHCP offer RSPs. If we click on that, we've got a pop-up that indicates why that is an error, what constitutes the error, and then we can drill deeper into the specific DHCP server that's been identified with the problem. So we're going to go to network history here. And then in network history, we can compare internal benchmarks with for this particular customer with industry established benchmarks that we've measured.
So that's an interesting use of the cloud, right? If you were to run this on-prem, you actually would have a hard time being able to compare against other companies. But because you're in the cloud, you're able to gather data from all your customers.
That's correct, yeah. and then do a comparison for DHCP performance across multiple customers.
Yeah, so you might think you have a good performing environment, but when in fact maybe you don't compared to your peers.
Correct. Yeah. So now we're going to go to health and remediation. What this is going to do is give us some dynamic recommendations of where to look to solve the problem. So here in health and remediation, we're going to click on the filter, and then we're going to see that 95% of the problem is caused by the DHCP server being not being reachable.
So your ability to drill down on that, my research shows that 90% of troubleshooting time is actually identifying the problem. Most engineers are pretty smart. Right? Once they know where the problem is, they can go fix it. Finding that, though, is that sometimes it's been described as a needle in a stack of needles.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's a good analogy. Yeah. So if we look at the root cause here and go down, we can see that this particular DHCP VLAN 3901 is responsible for 89% of the users who are unable to get a DHCP address. So now that you have that information, you know which VLAN, you know which server is the culprit, you can focus on where the root cause is and fix it quickly.
All right, well, I'm back at the Sassy stand here with Mike Scott again. And Mike, when I was whiteboarding with Scott, one of the things he brought up was Zero Trust Network Access, or ZTNA. That has become one of the hot buzzwords in the industry. I get asked a lot of questions about it. But again, it's another one of those terms that tends to have multiple meanings, right? So from your perspective, what is Zero Trust and why is it important today?
Zero Trust is the concept that by default, users have no access to anything. So it's an opt-in model versus an opt-out. So if you look at the old VPN access models or the legacy VPN access models, once someone has access to the network, they have access to everything on the network. Zero Trust, on the other hand, even if someone has network access, based on the policy for that specific user, they have to be specifically allowed access to any application or network function before they'll be able to use it.
Yeah, I've often thought about it as flipping networking around, right? The IP protocol works well because once you're connected, you have access to everything, which is why I can type vmware.com in a browser and I get instant access. The downside of that is once you reach, they have access to everything.
Correct.
Right, and so now if we flip that around and say you have access to nothing unless explicitly allowed, of course that's a lot more secure. But is that more complicated?
No, it's not more complicated. In a way, it's a lot simpler because when you have a ZTNA or a secure access solution, the end user management and the policy enforcement is all done through a single entity. It's in a centralized location.
Okay. And so show us exactly how your ZTNA solution works then.
Okay, from a basic architecture perspective, you've got an end user here, so that could be someone on their own device, laptop, sitting, anywhere, and in a coffee shop, accessing
that hybrid worker that we've all become so accustomed to.
Yeah, the work from anywhere
Yeah.
person. And so there's a thin client that goes onto that establishes a secure tunnel into one of our Sassy pops. It uses DNS to go to the closest Sassy pop, and then what it does is it authenticates to the secure access gateway. And what's really interesting about our architecture that I think differentiates us from a lot of other Sassy vendors is we've always had a cloud-first approach, even in the SD-WAN days, where our SD-WAN gateways were established out in the cloud. So what we've done is we've continued that architectural approach with Sassy. We have our secure access gateway as well as cloud web security that are functions that have been deployed alongside our gateway in the cloud, and that enables us to service chain those things together. So once someone has authenticated to the Sassy pop, now they can go out through cloud web security to the internet, or they can access applications or resources on another SD-WAN site within the customer network.
So the old way of doing this is we'd have connected through VPN to an edge, been given access to everything,
Correct.
trombone the traffic back and forth, so we'd have poor performance and less security.
Right.
Now, because we're directly connected to the cloud, we made very granular what we allow access to, correct?
Correct, and to kind of extend that idea a little bit further, what you used to see with a lot of on-prem deployments, you'd see customers would backhaul their traffic to a centralized data center location, then they have like a single big firewall, IDS, IPS, and that's the mechanism by which they control access out to the internet. Today, there's really no reason to backhaul to an on-prem data center location since most of the traffic is going out to the cloud, which is why this approach really makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but what did the big firewall vendors do? They made a lot of money selling those, didn't they?
That's true.
Yeah. Mike, I want to shift a little bit and talk about the benefits of Zero Trust networking. And to me, one of the big benefits is just limiting lateral access. So with the old VPN model, right, once you had access to one application, that threat actor, if the user was breached, would have access to everything, right? And so how does Zero Trust change that?
What Zero Trust does is it limits the blast radius of any potential breaches. So if an unauthorized user or threat actor gains access to the network, what they gain access to is limited by the Zero Trust model. So they can only gain access to that one particular area. It prevents them from looking around, mapping the network, enumerating the network, and making lateral movements, which is part of most typical threat models, where they're going to try to move laterally in the network to find higher value targets.
And so to me, this really helps against the number one cause of breaches that I've seen. I was talking with a company the other day that did penetration testing, and they said they generally can break into a company through user credentials 90% of the time, and then once they have access to one system, they're able to go in that whole low, slow threat where you're crawling around the network, nobody notices, right? Because you do have access to everything. And so in this case, the threat actor wouldn't actually be able to see anything else, correct?
They wouldn't, not by default. It definitely makes their job a lot more difficult.
So to me, when I think about the world and the way it's going, all these digital technologies bringing in cloud, IoT, to me, Zero Trust is the only way to secure it now. I don't really see how you could possibly do it using a lot of the older VLAN type technologies. It just wouldn't scale. And I don't know if you share that opinion or not.
I do, and I think it's a little bit more elegant approach. It's a more granular approach, and it makes more sense logically to only grant users explicit access to what they need and nothing they don't.
All right. Well, thanks for the demo. That was fantastic. I think Zero Trust is, again, one of those things that everybody should know about. If you haven't started your journey down it now, at least go through the educational process of understanding what it is, because this is going to be a foundational component to how you secure your network moving forward. All right, Mike, well, last topic here is multi-cloud. Now, multi-cloud is the theme of the show, right? Now, obviously, if you're going to be in multi-cloud, network connectivity is a really important part of this, as we need to be able to connect between clouds, and I think that's something that VMware does particularly well. So talk a little bit about how you're facilitating connectivity now to the cloud.
Sure, so we've got a couple different options to connect any cloud infrastructure provider. We can host IPsec-based tunnels into a VPN gateway, or more interestingly, we can actually deploy virtual network instances of our SD-WAN edge directly into the cloud, and that extends the SD-WAN network all the way from the customer premises all the way in to whatever infrastructure they have homed in the cloud.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, can you give a real-world example? How would you say connect into Azure?
Sure, so what we've got is we've got some automation here. We can deploy SD-WAN edges into Azure vWAN Hub by using this automation here in Marketplace. So you go into Azure Marketplace, you search VMware SD-WAN and vWAN, and you have the automation to deploy that. Now, in the interest of time, I've gone ahead and done the deployment, but once deployed, you can see...
So this is all pre-configured?
Correct.
Right.
So if I click here, you've got some options to create this, and this will actually pull up the ability to go in and fill out the details and of whatever your particular deployment is, and then have that automatically integrated into your Azure instance.
Point-and-click cloud connectivity, I like it. So why don't you show us what that looks like then?
So from our SD-WAN orchestrator side, once deployed, these are the two cluster members that we have deployed in. It's all managed through, the configuration's all managed through our orchestrator. And then from the Azure portal side, if you go into the demo vWAN and the demo of the West Hub that I've set up here, you can see that we've got a couple NVAs that have been deployed. And so Azure vWAN's a managed service. Once deployed, it's pretty much click and plug and play. So it's really simple, extremely quick to deploy.
Thanks for showing that. Now you showed us Azure.
Correct.
Am I correct in assuming that AWS, GCP connectivity would be very similar to that?
Correct. We have automation for all the major cloud platforms. You can deploy it automatically like we did here through Marketplace, or we have Azure ARM templates, AWS CloudFormation templates that really simplify and speed up the deployment of virtual edges into those services.
Well, this is great because I do believe we are rapidly approaching a multi-cloud world, and I'm glad to see that was the theme of VMware Explore. As my research is 95% of companies will at least, they're intending to be multi-cloud. So I think this concept of connecting to multiple cloud providers will soon become the norm.
Correct. We focused on Azure here just for convenience, but if a customer has a multi-cloud presence in different infrastructure providers, from the SD-WAN perspective, those just look like exit points on SD-WAN, so they would be able to have the same simple operational simplicity to access any of those cloud providers via the SD-WAN network.
All right, well thanks Mike, that was great.
Thank you.
All right, Scott, well last question here for you.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about how there's a multitude of SD-WAN vendors. Can you tell me what makes VMware unique in this area?
VMware is so unique. In fact, we've been leading in the space for several years, and it really comes down to these three things. So DMPO, that stands for Dynamic Multipath Optimization, and that's something unique to us where we no matter how many circuits you put connected to a VMware SD-WAN edge, we look at things like latency and decide what's the best path for the traffic to go on, and we actually steer it per packet versus per flow, which a lot of our competition does. And per
that
packet
actually makes a big difference on performance.
Absolutely, yeah, much more granularity. We make the best utilization of your connections and even reduce the amount of bandwidth you use in some
And that
cases.
probably becomes noticeable in a world where everyone's on Zoom.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. And in fact, there's a technology, another acronym called FEC, FEC, or Forward Error Correction, that's right, which is incredibly important to enhancing the quality of Zoom and Teams, WebEx, whatever type of telephony application you're using. Another one which is pretty unique to VMware SD-WAN is our cloud gateways. So not only have we built a couple thousand of these, our partners have some of these, and this allows us to reduce the latency of the last mile. And we provide a lot of these. Now, if you think about with some of the other vendors who don't have these, this is a do-it-yourself type of operation you have to do. So you have to think about purchasing the head-end devices, leasing the space in the data centers to house them, and then maintaining them going forward, which can be incredibly time-consuming and expensive.
And that doesn't really lend itself to the cloud model, right?
No, exactly. That's not cloud at all. That's very do-it-yourself. Exactly. Whereas this, we've done the work for you, and there's thousands of them, versus if you did it yourself, maybe you do 10 at the most, and it's just a lot of expense behind that. The other thing is, and this is a real key benefit of SD-WAN I think people forget about, is operational simplicity. What SD-WAN has done, in addition to enhancing the quality of the connectivity, is just maintaining your SD-WAN, giving you that end-to-end visibility, much more simple. And VMware has really done a great job of that from our orchestrator, and also when we do things like zero-touch provisioning. So we actually took our SD-WAN edges, and when we were developing our zero-touch provisioning, we sent them home and we had the kids of employees hook these up, activate them, so we knew that just about anybody could do it. And where other vendors might need like lots of Ansible scripting, a lot of manual effort to do something that should be zero touch, where ours is.
Yeah, and I like this fact because one general rule of thumb I have in corporate IT is your solution should always be simpler than the problem, and that's not always the case with technology products.
I totally agree. I totally agree.
All right, well, thanks for that. That was awesome.
Thank you.
So that ends the ZKTour at the VMware booth at VMware Explore. Thanks for joining me. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time on another tour.